The announcement. Chapter 1, A Galactic Shock. The holographic announcement flickered with an almost mischievous intensity, casting an eerie blue light across the cramped dormitory of Galactic University's interspecies accommodation wing. Zix Sayer, a seven-tentacled cephalarian whose epidermis was notorious for changing colors based on emotional states, currently radiated a deep purple of pure disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," he groaned, his tentacles writhing in a complex pattern that would translate to pure exasperation in his native language. His roommate Blur, a gelatinous blob with 7 independently mobile eye stalks, oozed closer to read the message. Despite their vastly different physiological structures, they had been roommates for 3 standard galactic cycles and had developed a remarkable understanding of each other. "It says here," Blur gurgled, his translucent body rippling with each word, "in the spirit of interspecies understanding and cultural exchange, students are now permitted to bring their domesticated companions to class." Blur's eye stalks swiveled independently, one focusing on the announcement while others darted around the room. "Guess the dean's been hitting the fermented nectar again." Zix's epidermis flushed an even deeper shade of purple, bordering on ultraviolet. The implications were staggering. Domesticated companions. On a multicultural campus that hosted over 247 different sentient species from across the known galaxy. "But," Zix stammered, his normally articulate communication tentacles tangling in agitation, "some of those Deathworlders have monsters as pets. Remember that time Shthar showed us pictures of his dog? I had nightmares for a week." The memory was still vivid, a 4-legged creature with rows of sharp teeth, covered in fur, with eyes that seemed to hold an unsettling intelligence. Shthar, a human exchange student, had proudly displayed images of what he called a good boy, a concept that made absolutely no sense to most non-human species. Blur, ever the optimist, rolled all 7 of his eyes in what could only be described as a galactic equivalent of an eye roll. "Oh, come on. How bad could it be? Maybe they'll bring some cute, fluffy creatures that will make even your cold, deteriorating heart melt." Little did they know that the next day would go down in Galactic University history as the Day of 1,000 Screams. Or, as the humans would later call it, "Bring your badass pet to school day." Chapter 2, Preparations and Panic. The news spread quickly through the campus's complex communication networks. Holographic bulletin boards flickered with updates, translation matrices worked overtime to convey the nuanced meaning of pets across different linguistic and conceptual frameworks, and panic began to set in among the more sensitive species. The Chlorophyllian Diplomatic Corps sent out emergency communication packets, advising their students on potential survival strategies. The Venusian Interstellar Academy circulated a detailed risk assessment document that was 742 pages long, complete with threat matrices and potential containment protocols. Zix spent the night researching Earth-based companion animals, his research tentacles interfacing with the university's extensive databases. Each new discovery only increased his anxiety. "Blur," he called out around 0300 Standard Galactic Time, "did you know humans keep creatures called spiders as pets?" Spiders. Multiple-legged predators that create intricate trap networks. Blur, who was in his nightly regenerative state, gurgled something that roughly translated to "go to sleep" in 5 different languages. But sleep was the last thing on Zix's mind. As the twin moons of the campus planet rose, casting ethereal lavender light through the dormitory windows, he continued his frantic research, his epidermis cycling through shades of anxiety, pale green, deep purple, electric blue. The universe, it seemed, was about to get a lot more complicated. Epilogue to Part 1. As dawn broke over the campus, casting long shadows across alien landscapes and human-designed architecture, a sense of anticipation, and dread, hung in the air. Something unprecedented was about to happen, something that would challenge every preconceived notion about interspecies interaction. And nobody was prepared. Not even close. The Lecture Hall of Chaos. Professor Synthro slithered into the lecture hall, his iridescent scales glistening under the artificial lights. As the foremost expert on xenobiology in the Andromeda Galaxy, he prided himself on being unflappable. His reputation for maintaining absolute composure during even the most bizarre scientific presentations was legendary. That reputation was about to be spectacularly destroyed. The usual sea of tentacles, antennae, and assorted alien appendages was now punctuated by something entirely unexpected. When Synth Ro's multifaceted eyes scanned the room, he momentarily thought he was hallucinating. In the front row, a human student named Todd sat with what appeared to be a furry four-legged killing machine on his lap. The beast's tongue lolled out of its mouth, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth that would make most predatory species look like gentle herbivores. "Mr. Todd," Synth Ro began, trying desperately to keep his voice steady, "what in the name of the seven moons is that?" Todd beamed, scratching the creature behind its pointed ears. "This is Rex, my German shepherd. Isn't he adorable?" The adorable Rex chose that precise moment to let out a thunderous bark that caused half the class to leap, or ooze, several feet into the air. Several delicate sensory stalks retracted in pure terror. A Florian student in the back row began to photosynthesize at an accelerated rate, which was their species' equivalent of a panic response. "Adorable," Synth Ro muttered, making a mental note to update his will later. Chapter 4, The Menagerie begins. The lecture hall transformed into a menagerie of earth creatures that defied all logical comprehension. Miss Jaya, another human student, sat with a scaled creature draped around her shoulders. "And this," she said with a proud grin, "is Noodle, my ball python. Don't worry, she's friendly." A collective gasp rippled through the alien students. The word "friendly" seemed to hold a dramatically different meaning for humans. Synth Ro's gaze darted around the room, taking in the increasingly surreal scene. A ferret darting in and out of a Glee student's many pockets. A parrot mimicking the mating call of a beetle Gaian, causing said alien to turn a mortified shade of chartreuse. Was that a tarantula crawling up the wall? "Let's, begin our lesson on non-threatening herbivores of the Cygnus system," Synth Ro said, his usually melodious voice now a strained squeak. Chapter 5, The Great Chase. Chaos erupted with the precision of a well-choreographed disaster. The ferret, apparently named Bandit, decided the lecture hall was an excellent venue for a high-speed chase. It darted across desks, causing a wave of shrieks and flailing limbs. "Bandit, come back here," yelled its owner, a lanky human named Alex, in hot pursuit. The parrot, not to be outdone, took flight. Circling the room, it squawked a mixture of earth profanities and alien mating calls. The beetle Gaian student looked like he wanted to dissolve into his chair. Todd's German shepherd Rex, apparently finding the ferret an excellent playmate, leaped from his lap. With powerful legs, he cleared rows of desks, joining the chase with joyful barks. Professor Synth Ro watched in horror as his carefully planned lesson devolved into what looked like a scene from a slapstick comedy. He briefly considered retiring to a nice, quiet gas giant where the only life forms were simple hydrogen-based microbes. Epilogue to Part 2. As the lecture descended into complete pandemonium, one thing became crystal clear: humans and their pets were going to fundamentally redefine the concept of interspecies interaction. And nobody, absolutely nobody, was prepared for what would come next. The day was young. The chaos was just beginning. Cafeteria Chaos. Chapter 6, Lunch Hour Mayhem. Grick the Erewhon lunch lady had witnessed countless culinary disasters across her centuries of serving space slop. She had survived food fights that spanned multiple star systems, handled cuisine that would poison most known sentient species, and maintained her composure through intergalactic diplomatic banquets. But nothing could have prepared her for this. The Galactic University cafeteria, typically a model of multicultural dining order, had transformed into a battlefield of biological unpredictability. Humans moved about with an alarming nonchalance, accompanied by creatures that would be classified as Class 5 potential threat entities on most civilized planets. At one table, a human girl casually ate with one hand while dangling something small and wriggling in the other. "Excuse me," Grick chittered nervously, her translator struggling to maintain composure, "I think you dropped something." The girl looked up, confusion evident in her eyes. "Oh, this isn't a dropped item. It's for Mr. Whiskers." She gestured to a glass tank on the table. Grick's sensory appendages froze. "Mr. Whiskers." The girl dropped the small, live creature into the tank. What happened next would be etched into Grick's memory for generations to come. Chapter 7, Predators at Lunch. The Andromedans at a nearby table were conducting their typical lunch ritual, cautiously poking their nutrient cubes with specialized sensory probes. Today, however, their routine was interrupted by an unexpected companion. A golden retriever sat patiently beside its human, its tail sweeping the floor in rhythmic, almost hypnotic motions. Is it going to eat us?" one Andromedian whispered, their translucent exoskeleton trembling. The dog's owner, a burly human named Mike, laughed. "Buddy here only eats dog food and the occasional homework assignment." The Andromedans did not find this reassuring, especially when Buddy let out an earth-shattering sneeze that launched a glob of drool across 3 separate dining sections. Chapter 8, Unexpected Interactions. In the cafeteria's corner, a particularly brave Venusian had struck up a conversation with Emily, a petite human cradling what appeared to be a ball of sentient cotton. "So, what's that?" the Venusian asked, extending a cautious tentacle. Emily beamed. "This is Snowball, my Angora rabbit. Want to pet her?" The Venusian hesitantly extended a tentacle, then yanked it back with a yelp when Snowball twitched her nose. It moves," the Venusian exclaimed. Emily couldn't help but giggle. "That's just how rabbits are. They're harmless, I promise." "Harmless?" the Venusian looked horrified. "It has claws and teeth. On my planet, anything with claws and teeth is classified as a Class 3 extinction-level threat." As if on cue, Snowball let out an adorable little sneeze. The result was instantaneous. The Venusian leaped backward, knocking over 3 chairs and a very confused Martian in the process. Chapter 9, The Alligator Incident. Jake's entrance with his pet caused an immediate, universal silence. "Everyone, meet Snappy," he announced proudly, patting a scaly creature's head. The entire cafeteria stared. Various sensory organs, optical receptors, and perception mechanisms were fixed on the reptilian beast. Is that a Terran swamp dragon?" Grick asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake grinned. "Close. This is an alligator. They're related to dinosaurs. Snappy here is still young, so he's allowed inside. When he's full-grown, he'll have to stay in the campus pond." The idea that this terrifying creature was considered young sent a collective shudder through the alien students. Several made mental notes to avoid the campus pond for the remainder of their academic careers. Snappy, oblivious to the terror he was causing, let out a yawn that displayed rows of razor-sharp teeth. A Plutonian student promptly fainted. Epilogue to Part 3. As the lunch hour drew to a close, one thing became abundantly clear: the concept of pet was a far more complex and terrifying notion than any alien civilization had ever imagined. And this was just the beginning. The universe would never be the same again. Beyond First Impressions. Chapter 10, The Unexpected Lesson. Professor Synth Rowe had survived countless academic challenges. He had navigated diplomatic negotiations between species that communicated through quantum entanglement. He had written dissertation papers that spanned 3 different dimensional planes of existence. But nothing had prepared him for the most challenging lecture of his career. "Perhaps," he said carefully, his scales shifting to a contemplative shade of blue-green, "we should discuss this further. Humans, why don't you tell us more about your relationships with your animal companions?" The alien students leaned in, a mixture of terror and fascination etched across their various sensory organs. Chapter 11, Personal Stories. Lisa went first, her fingers gently stroking the scales of Noodle, her ball python. "There's something incredibly soothing about watching her move," she explained. "After a stressful day of quantum mechanics and interstellar xenobiology, Noodle helps me relax." Several alien students scooted their chairs away, but a few, notably more curious individuals, leaned closer. Alex spoke next, a proud grin spreading across his face. "Bandit might be a klepto, but he's family. He once stole every left sock in my dorm. Took me weeks to find where he'd hidden them." The concept was utterly alien to the non-human students. Why would anyone keep a creature that deliberately stole personal belongings? And why would they sound so fond while describing such behavior? Chapter 12, The Midnight Companion. Sarah's story about her cat Whiskers would become legendary in the annals of interspecies communication. "So there I was," she began, her eyes twinkling with mischief, "sound asleep at 3 a.m. Suddenly, I feel this weight on my chest. I open my eyes, and there's Whiskers, staring right at me. His face is about an inch from mine." The alien students leaned in, expecting a tale of nocturnal terror. "And then," Sarah continued, grinning, "he boops me on the nose with his paw and meows for food. It was adorable." A moment of stunned silence followed. Zik Sayer, his tentacles tied in stress knots, finally spoke. "Let me get this straight. This creature stalks you in your sleep, wakes you at odd hours, and demands food. And you find this endearing?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Of course. That's just how cats show love." Chapter 13, Redefining Companionship. The alien students began to see something they hadn't anticipated. These weren't just animals. They were companions. Friends. Family members. A Syrian student, his antenna twitching in genuine confusion, asked the question burning in every alien mind. "But why would you willingly share your living space with a potential predator?" Todd, still scratching Rex behind the ears, grinned. "Because they're loyal, loving, and great companions. Plus, have you seen how cute they are when they're sleeping?" As if on cue, Rex rolled over, his tongue lolling out in a doggy grin. Several alien students cooed in spite of themselves. Chapter 14, Scientific Curiosity Meets Emotional Connection. Professor Synth Rowe's scientific curiosity began to override his initial fear. "It seems humans have developed a symbiotic relationship with these creatures. But surely there must be drawbacks." The humans looked at each other and shrugged. "Well," Alex said, "Bandit did once chew through my quantum physics homework. Try explaining that to Professor Week." Lisa nodded. "And Noodle has a habit of escaping her terrarium. You haven't lived until you've had to explain to your Zorak roommate why there's a snake in the shower." Surprisingly, the alien students found themselves laughing. The human's ability to find humor in potentially dangerous situations was both baffling and oddly admirable. Epilogue to Part 4. As the class wore on, something remarkable happened. The initial terror began to give way to cautious curiosity. By the lesson's end, several alien students were brave enough to approach the humans and their pets, asking to touch or interact with these strange Earth creatures. Zik Sayer, who had spent most of the class in a state of high anxiety, found himself reluctantly petting Rex. To his surprise, the dog's fur was soft, and the rhythmic thumping of its tail was oddly soothing. "You know," he said to Todd, his tentacles finally beginning to unknot, "I think I'm starting to understand why you keep these creatures around. There's something comforting about them." Todd beamed. "See? I told you Rex was a good boy." The universe, it seemed, was about to get a lot more interesting. And a lot more loving. Galactic Connections. Chapter 15, Aftermath and Reflection. As the twin moons of the campus planet rose, casting their ethereal lavender light across the landscape, the alien students gathered in the common room. The day's events hung in the air like a complex, multidimensional tapestry of experiences. Professor Synthro slithered in, looking both exhausted and inexplicably exhilarated. "Well, students," he began, his scales shimmering with an unusual luminescence, "I hope today has been educational. I must admit, my perspective on human-animal relationships has been significantly broadened." His words were punctuated by a cacophony of sounds, barks, meows, squawks, and hisses, as human students and their pets filed past the common room, heading back to their dormitories. Chapter 16, Unexpected Connections. Blur, the gelatinous blob who had initially been skeptical, found himself bubbling with excitement. "Did you see the way that ferret moved? It was like a furry liquid." Zix Sayer, who had spent most of the day in a state of near-constant anxiety, grudgingly admitted, "I suppose some of them were less terrifying than anticipated. That rabbit creature was almost tolerable." "Almost tolerable," Blur emphasized, his eye stalks wiggling with amusement. "I saw you petting it when you thought no one was looking. You even smiled." Zix's epidermis flushed a deep purple of embarrassment. "I was merely conducting a tactile examination for scientific purposes," he muttered unconvincingly. Chapter 17, A Moment of Insight. Their conversation was interrupted by an unexpected arrival, a small, round robot that rolled into the room, beeping cheerfully. It was Zix's cleaning droid, a gift from his parents to help maintain his living space. "Now this," Zix said, patting the droid affectionately, "is my kind of pet. No teeth, no claws, and it actually cleans up after itself." The alien students laughed, the tension of the day finally breaking. A new sense of camaraderie filled the air. Chapter 18, The Deeper Lesson. Blur mused thoughtfully, his gelatinous form shifting contemplatively. "You know, if they can form bonds with creatures so different from themselves, perhaps there's hope for greater understanding between all species." Zix nodded, his tentacles relaxing for the first time that day. "Perhaps you're right. Though I still think I'll stick to non-carnivorous companions, thank you very much." Chapter 19, A Glimpse into the Future. Outside the window, as the moons continued their celestial dance, a chorus of howls, chirps, and various alien communication sounds echoed across the campus grounds. It was a symphony of life, of connection, of unexpected friendships. The humans and their pets had done more than just introduce their animal companions to alien students. They had opened a window into a different way of understanding companionship, empathy, and love. Epilogue, Beyond Species. As the night deepened, the Galactic University campus hummed with a new energy. The day's events had changed something fundamental. Barriers that seemed insurmountable just hours ago now appeared permeable, even fragile. Zix Sayer looked at Rex, Todd's German shepherd, who was now peacefully sleeping at his human's feet. The dog's rhythmic breathing was almost soothing. Maybe, just maybe, the universe was a more wonderful place than he had ever imagined. The end.